and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. Now, just a day to go before New York City gets its new mayor and possibly, as trends suggest, its first Muslim mayor. Yes, Zohran Mamdani is leading in polls and, as pollsters predict, could become the Democrat socialist to assume the mayoral role for New York City. But his victory poses a challenge for President Donald Trump, who in a surprising move has thrown his weight behind former Democrat governor and now independent candidate Andrew Cuomo. A report by Mahashweta Lala.
The clock is ticking for Democratic candidate Zohran Mamdani as the mayoral race for the New York City enters the final leg. As pollsters predict victory for Mamdani, President Donald Trump has thrown his weight behind independent candidate and former governor Andrew Cuomo. Mamdani faces competition from former Democratic governor Cuomo and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa. During an interview, Trump contradicted the interviewer when she called Mamdani a socialist. He said Mamdani is a communist and not a socialist. He further added that if Trump were to choose between a former bad Democrat and a communist, he will pick a bad Democrat.
If somebody's going to be a communist mayor of New York, it's a fluke if he gets in. There are a lot of failed people that he's running against. I mean, you have inferior candidates or something, and because it's impossible to think that New York City can have a communist mayor. He's a communist. He's not a socialist, by the way. There's a big difference. He's a communist. He's down and dirty. He's a communist. He hates police. He wants to get rid of all police. I mean, how can a policeman? He hates Jewish people, and yet he's got Jewish people supporting. He hates Jewish people. So it comes through the White House. The funding for New York and for every place comes through the White House. And I'm very generous, and I was always very generous with New York, even when you had opposition there, but I was always very generous. But I wouldn't be generous to a communist, a guy that's going to take the money and throw it out the window, because you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. And we're not going to let somebody get into office and squander the taxpayer money from this country. We're not going to let it happen.
But Zohran Mamdani was not far behind. He reacted to Trump's endorsement of Cuomo with this message posted on X. Mamdani's popularity in polls have surged as his campaign focused on housing affordability, free public transport, and childcare. But Mamdani's support base has not been restricted to the youngsters only. He also reportedly got a call from former President Barack Obama. Obama praised Mamdani's campaign against his rivals. 34-year-old Mamdani's social media posts and his campaign style has attracted large followers. In a recent post, Mamdani spoke in Arabic to the NYC residents with Middle East background.
مرحبا، أنا اسمي زهران ممداني وعم رشح حالي ليكون العمدة الجديد في مدينة نيويورك. بعرف شو عم تفكروا، شكلي كأني صهركم من الشام، بس العربي تبعي بده شوية شغل. مع هيك أنا حابب اليوم أطلب دعمكم يوم 4 نوفمبر.
Mamdani had won the primaries. If he wins the NYC mayoral election, Mamdani will become the first Muslim mayor of NYC. Uganda-born Mamdani's father, Professor Mahmood Mamdani, is a respected political thinker. His mother, Meera Nair, is a renowned Indian-American filmmaker. But despite having Indian lineage, he does not enjoy a fan base in India. His criticism of Prime Minister Narendra Modi has earned him the ire of Indians. Many perceive him as holding an anti-India position. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
But it's not only Zohran Mamdani who is making headlines in the U.S. Another Indian-born and Democrat, Ghazala Hashmi, who is running for the post of Lieutenant Governor in Virginia, is stirring things up. She spoke in an exclusive interview to India Today Global and dispelled doubts cast ahead of the final poll. Listen in to her conversation with my colleague Rohit Sharma.
A lot is going on in the country right now, especially when it comes to people of a certain color, certain religion. What's your message to Virginians, who probably are distressed by looking at what's going on in America.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I've heard loud and clear is that Virginians do not like the direction that the second Trump administration is taking us in. And Virginia is such a complex state already. It's home to hundreds of different immigrant communities. You know, just in our local schools here in the Richmond area, we have over 100 languages that are spoken by our own students. And Virginia has been a welcome home for many, many different immigrants, as well as refugees and so many diverse people. And so Virginia wants to make sure that we are inclusive, that we are proud of the diversity that we have, and that we are supporting everyone that lives here. And I've heard that on the campaign trail, and that continues to give me hope. And I certainly see that reflected in the number of different people that we have running for elected office. Our Virginia General Assembly is a representative of the diverse communities as well. We've really seen increased representation both in the House of Delegates as well as in the Virginia Senate.
Islamophobia, and we're seeing that play out in New York too, you know, with Zohran Mamdani's campaign. Like, America has changed, right? And what's your message to somebody who probably doesn't feel welcome in America, or who've stayed in America for so many number of years and are hesitant to share their roots, be it their Indian roots or their religious roots? How, just out of, all this stuff that we're seeing, if there's one thing that you would want to tell to the minorities, what would that be?
Well, that was the impetus for me to run for office actually in 2019, to prove to myself that I actually belonged in this country. I'd lived here for 50 years and I needed that validation. And the fact that I was elected, that I flipped a red seat blue, and that I won a competitive seat by 10 points very much confirmed for me that people in this country and people in Virginia are genuinely focused on making sure that we continue to make progress. My campaign in 2019, my tagline was Ghazala Hashmi is an American name. I asked voters to help me prove that, and they did resoundingly. And that continues to give me hope for ourselves, for America, and for the communities that we build here.
As reports of killing of large number of Christians in Nigeria came, U.S. President Donald Trump in a Truth Social post said the U.S. military could deploy troops to Nigeria or carry out airstrikes to stop the killings of Christians in the African country. Earlier, President Trump had also criticized South Africa for the persecution of white South Africans. Seems like the American president is on a mission.
U.S. President Donald Trump said the U.S. military could deploy troops to Nigeria or carry out airstrikes to stop what he called the killing of large numbers of Christians in the African country.
On Nigeria, just wanted to ask you, do you envisage U.S. boots on the ground?
Could be. I mean, a lot of things I envisage, a lot of things. They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
But the Nigerian government has denied persecution or genocide of Christians in Nigeria.
The report or notion that there is a Christian persecution or genocide in Nigeria is false. False both from the premise and the conclusion. It is not supported by data.
Earlier in a post on Truth Social, Trump posted that if killing of Christians continue, then US will stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. He also said that US will go guns a-blazing to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists committing the horrible atrocities. Replying to Trump's post, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the Department of War is preparing for action in Nigeria if the Nigerian government fails to protect Christians amid reports of violence in the country. Nigerian government says it welcomes US's help to fight Islamic insurgents, but as long as its territorial integrity is being respected.
We haven't been given the opportunity to have F-15, F-18 and F-22, and it is hard to get that from America for now. But these are the areas that we need that kind of cooperation from the American government. Our soldiers have the capability to deal with this thing, so we do not require the American soldiers' boots on the ground.
Nigeria, a country of more than 220 million people and around 200 ethnic groups, is divided between the largely Muslim north and mostly Christian south. Islamist insurgents such as Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa province have wreaked havoc in the country for more than 15 years, killing thousands of people. But their attacks have been largely confined to the northeast of the country, which is majority Muslim. While Christians have been killed, the vast majority of the victims have been Muslims.
It's not only the Christians they are killing those who are not Christian too. But that they are coming to assist. We should allow them, but we should not just depend on them alone, because it's only God that can really save us from this situation.
In central Nigeria, there have been frequent clashes between mostly Muslim herders and mainly Christian farmers over access to water and pasture. While in the northwest of the country, gunmen routinely attack villages, kidnapping residents for ransom. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, days after US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in South Korea, both countries have agreed to set up military-to-military channels to de-conflict and de-escalate any problems. In a statement on X, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said he and his Chinese counterpart, Minister of National Defense Dong Jun, made the decision following a phone call. Hegseth said following his meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Malaysia, the ministers agreed that peace, stability and good relations are the best part of our two great and strong countries. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, most of them and more than 90 communication channels between the US and Chinese governments went dormant during Trump's first term as US president from 2017 to 2021. China went on to cut the fuel links with the US military in 2022 under Joe Biden, when the then House Speaker, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan. Tensions eased following a meeting between Biden and Xi in November 2023, with the two leaders also agreeing to resume high-level military-to-military communications, but nothing further. This is the first reset. But what does this reset mean for the two countries and more so for the geopolitical dynamics across the world and the new world order? You can watch a detailed analysis on Statecraft on India Today Global's YouTube channel. Now, Donald Trump has perceived tariffs as the best way to boost the country's economy and a major policy decision to make America great again. But an upcoming US Supreme Court case on tariffs, according to Trump, will be significant in American history as it will determine the country's economic strength and security. The case will come up for hearing on the 5th of November. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said, and I quote, "Next week's case on tariffs is one of the most important in the history of the country. If a president is not allowed to use tariffs, we will be at a major disadvantage against all other countries throughout the world, especially the majors. In a true sense, we would be defenseless. Tariffs have brought us great wealth and national security in the 9 months that I have had the honor to serve as president." The Trump administration heads to the US Supreme Court on Wednesday. They will have a face-off with small businesses and a group of states who contend most of the tariffs it has put in place are illegal and should be struck down. If the court agrees with the businesses, the government will also likely have to refund some of the billions of dollars it has collected through the tariffs, which are taxes on imports. The ruling, if not in Trump's favor, will also upend his trade policy, including the global tariffs announced in April. Trump further added that he will not attend the hearing personally, stating that he didn't want to distract from the decision. The hearing will also decide whether Trump has the legal authority to impose tariffs by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Trump used the power to raise tariffs on countries. One such was 50% tariff on India for purchasing Russian oil. Trump is the first president to invoke this statute, which often has been used to apply punitive economic sanctions to adversaries or against adversaries to impose tariffs. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he expects the Supreme Court to hold or to uphold the IEEPA-based tariffs. But if it strikes down the tariffs, Bessent said in an interview, the administration will simply switch to other tariff authorities, including Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows broad 15% tariffs for 150 days to calm trade imbalances.
I'm quite optimistic, and Shannon, what I can tell you is that because of what the Chinese did on October 8th, threatening to put export controls on any rare earth products that they produce that had 0.01% of rare earths produced in China, that they were going to try to control those, and the president was able to push back using his IEEPA powers. If that's not use of an emergency power, at an emergency time, I don't know what is.
Now, as a fragile ceasefire holds or really doesn't in Gaza, the city remains scarred. Hospitals lie in ruin. Refugee camps now are under threat, and millions wait in fear for the next outbreak of violence. To unpack this crisis for us, political scientist Norman Finkelstein joins us. He has been a fearless critic of Israel's policies and Western double standards. Professor Finkelstein, thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin with your assessment of what's happened in Gaza following the fragile ceasefire. Is it holding? Is it not?
Happening in Gaza today is the hostages held by Israel, the hostages held by Hamas have been released. And beyond that, the other 19 points of President Trump's so-called ceasefire plan will be quickly forgotten. The situation will return to what it was before October 7th, with the big exception that Gaza is no more. The place has been pulverized, decimated, reduced to rubble. There's nothing there. And Israel will have achieved its fundamental aim of, as it said from day one, to make Gaza unlivable, or to give the people of Gaza two choices: to stay and starve or to leave. And they will figure out ways to leave. Everything else in the plan is complete nonsense. Most of the Arab countries, not most, all of the Arab countries simply agree to anything Trump says, and then they walk out and they forget it.
Well, Professor Finkelstein, the world and many Arab countries included have credited Trump. How do you see Trump's role in the Israel-Palestine peace process?
President Trump has one concern only: what's good for President Trump. He doesn't have, the expression from Louis XIV, l'état c'est moi, the state, that's me. He conflates the interests of the state with his own personal interests. Now, in general, that's not incorrect. He's a member of the economic ruling class. So his interests are the interests of the ruling class. They do overlap. So when he looks out for his interests, he's looking out for the interests of the class he serves, the big capitalist class. However, sometimes his interests do not overlap with that of the big capitalist class. So Mr. Trump is at heart, he's a real estate developer. And you don't change, your DNA doesn't change when you hit your 70s. It's baked into him. He's a real estate developer. That's his instinct. That's his reflex. That's his impulse. And he's been very straightforward about it. He calls the potential of a deal with Saudi Arabia, he calls it, quote, the deal of the century. Because for him, it will be a real estate bonanza. Saudi Arabia is investing trillions of dollars in, quote unquote, modernizing itself, which basically means construction. And he will get, his son, the nitwit, Jared Kushner, his daughter, his son-in-law, his daughter, Ivanka, they will get probably a very high percentage of those real estate contracts. But there's one problem. Saudi can't sign on to the deal of the century while Israel's committing genocide in Gaza. Not that Saudi cares. I mean, the Saudis starved to death, 100,000 children between 2015 and 2018 when they imposed the embargo, the blockade.
We're talking about, Professor Finkelstein, just talking about the starvation, the manner in which people have been killed. Now, a lot of people and Israelis I've spoken to, we do, ask whether if one can compare it to the Holocaust, as many have been saying. And a lot of people say, no, the numbers are not the same. Of course, the numbers are not the same. But is this systemic extermination of an entire peoples?
When you compare genocides, obviously numbers matter. And there's no comparison in the numbers between Israel and the Nazi genocide. Numbers matter. On the other hand, Hitler and the people surrounding him, they recognized you can't do that sort of stuff, a genocide in public. They did it behind behind closed doors or out in the killing fields in the course of a war, which everybody had the alibi. It was fake. But the Germans had the alibi. It was fake. That they didn't know. You can't say that with the Israelis. Everything was unfolding in real life before your eyes. There was no attempt to conceal. Well, there was some attempt. They always said they were fighting Hamas. But anybody who had his or her eyes open recognized that when you are, as it's been documented, targeting children, as it's been documented, targeting journalists, as it's been documented, targeting medical personnel, as it's been documented, targeting UN workers. Well, that's clearly, it's not a war, it's a genocide in full view. So in that case, they're actually worse than the Nazis. The Nazis built, they did pretend it was not happening.
Professor Finkelstein, thank you so much for joining us here and sharing your views on what's happening in Gaza today. With that, it's a close of this edition of India Today Global. But before we go, we leave you with visuals of fireworks and a dazzling drone light show illuminating the night sky over Egypt's Giza as Egypt celebrated the long-awaited opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum located near the pyramids. Drones formed images of ancient Egypt treasures, including the golden mask, coffin, and throne of King Tutankhamun, as well as the ceremonial chariot and the ship of King Khufu. The show also featured a laser and shadow performance projected against the backdrop of the museum. Enjoy the visuals. Goodbye and take care. Bye.